I'm going to get going. I know people are still trickling in for the keynote. That's cool. I'm trying to think of the best way to start. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. How many people feel like they need to read between the lines when reading or listening to what people have to say? Thank you. Yay, good response. Ever feel like it is all Greek to you? There you go. When trying to convey a message, especially one that you feel is important, why would you ever choose words that aren't commonly used and can be interpreted various ways? For example, I know a few people that like to use like bifurcate instead of split. It's like, really? When I first heard it, I didn't even know what it meant. I think I looked at Andrew and I said, what? So just something to keep in mind. This talk is called Never Mind Your Diet, Cut the Crap from Your Vocabulary. Welcome to BSides and the Proving Ground. Sorry, I know I'm shaking. Over the years, I've read various articles, posts, attended several talks, and listened to people, and to be honest, tune them out. Because I get to the point where they say so many big words, fluffy words, and I'm like, what are you really trying to say? And same with blog posts. I get to a point where they're so long, I stop reading them. So this morning, I'm just looking to address your vocabulary and how to clean it up, be precise when you're speaking and writing, presenting, training, whatever medium you choose. Who am I? My name is Keli. I've been in tech for about 20 years now. My first job out of college, actually the last year at college, was working with a tech writing group, transitioning them from Macs to PCs, training them, and from then I've worked at an ISP doing tech support. My gift is really translating what developers create into what people can consume, either through technical writing, training, course development, whatever the case may be. The last 7 years, my focus has been training. I'm currently at FireEye. My specialization there is certifications, exams, and labs. I've co-authored a book with my husband Andrew, who's sitting over here. Some of you may know him, may not. No, there's a chance. Nope. What else can I tell you about me? When not working, well, just about anything. I like sports a lot. I like to sit at a bar and drink beer and watch sports. Hockey, rugby, you know, stuff like that. Rugby, there you go. So, in the talk today, my goal is to cover clear, focused training content, whether it's presenting, documentation, presentation, online communication, of course, thinking Twitter, blogs, whatever the case may be, and even error messages, because we all know how good error messages are. Has anybody here heard of Bloom's taxonomy? Wendy, yay!
I don't remember what it is, but
I don't remember what it is. Well, Bloom's, and I'm going to have to go to my notes a little bit about this, because it's very focused on training. So the idea of Bloom's is to classify education levels. And there's 6 levels. Knowledge is remembering previously learned content, so it's recall type questions. Comprehension is more demonstrating the understanding of the facts. So think of like define, explain something. So if somebody gives you a term, you should be able to define what it is exactly. Application, so actually applying your knowledge, so like a lab type setting where, go and install a product, actually testing you in the application of doing that. Analysis would be more about breaking down objects or ideas into simpler parts and finding evidence to support them. So troubleshooting scenarios would be an example of that. Then synthesis, if I could say it. It'd be compiling component ideas into whole or proposing new alternative solutions. So advanced thinking, deduction based on provided content, stuff like that. And finally, evaluation, so making and defending judgments based on evidence or external criteria. The reason I bring this up, it is very training focused, but I find when when helping people giving like presentations similar to what I'm doing, I find this really helps in developing content and presentations because I like to sort of test people as I go with things in my presentation. So it's just something to think about as you go forward. As I said, more training focused than anything, but I find it's very helpful to follow. And I will be circling back to this, by the way. So when it comes to training, I'm going to say clear communication. I am going to break it down between who, what, when, where, and why, and even how. Some of it's a little sketchy. It's hard to map back, but follow along. Speak up if you have anything to add, by the way. I know I'm going to be kind of lecture mode. I'm going to try and break that as I go, because I said speak up. Any input, any comments, always appreciated, unless it's sarcastic. So, well, you're both back there together now, so I can just look that way, and I can get two of you at once.
Cloud hanging back here?
Maybe. So when it comes to training, who should attend? Do you know who's using your product? Do you know exactly who's using your product, I guess, or your service? Because when it comes to training, even presenting, your audiences are going to be very different. You got managers, you got your developers, you got your administrators and end users. Everybody is very, very different, and you really need to recognize the differences between each so you can communicate effectively with each role. This sample list in particular, a previous company that I worked for, they had a defined education department. They had a defined list of roles, and so this list is from one course. These were the roles they said were to be part of this particular course that I pulled a sample from. So within this course, everything is written around these roles, and even the labs, there's scenarios written around the roles so that when they're going through the motions, they can relate it back to what they do in their workspace. What else can I add here? Oh yes, one thing that I find very interesting when people speak, when they think of who, they think in general who. They'll think, okay, I'm speaking to a room of CEOs. Well, CEO at a bank is going to be very different from a CEO at a university, and I think it takes a real certain special person really to understand the differences between those roles and the different sectors that people are in. So it's very important to know exactly, not just the role, but even the industry they're in, and be able to speak and relate to them. Just something else to keep in mind. This is actually a marketing example. I don't know if anybody in the room works for this company, but I came across this write-up. And then there was a three-paragraph write-up. This was submitted to RSA last year. Three-paragraph write-up. This was one sentence as to what they do. And I thought it was really funny because I thought it was very wordy. And I am very bad now because I'm very precise in my writing. I read marketing, and to be honest, I just what? Like, what are you saying? Seriously. Like, when I read this, I thought I'd totally rewrite it to our company resources, our security experts who have identified some of the most critical computer security vulnerabilities and help secure critical infrastructures and data assets of large global organizations, as opposed to this, which I read it twice, and I thought, what? And then I was able to sort of shorten it up a little bit. And I thought it was pretty cute. I love that and Robin. When it comes to content in general, when developing any type of content, you must be really careful with what you say too. Reread and constantly revise your words to make sure what you say is clear and easy to understand. Remember to indicate your objectives at the beginning of whatever you're communicating. Even though your slide title might be clear, it might be best to just clarify it a little bit more, just so people know exactly what your focus is. This presentation alone, Brian helped me. I think I revised it 3 or 4 times because my trainer thought, oh, I can go this way. And I thought I can go this way. And then I came back and said, no, that's not my focus. I'm trying to, and I brought it in a little bit. You'll see I go off a little bit, but there's reason for it. Also, when communicating, best to really write in plain English. Now, that might sound really funny to some people, but when you think of translations, it's amazing the words that can be misconstrued, and they don't translate well at all. Even something as simple, I had it up before, the word since, a lot of people will put it to as, because, and it's words like that, it's little words that make a huge difference when it comes to translating. And also just, you need to be careful of, I'm trying to think of the best way to say this, clearness also to avoid colloquialisms, because you want to make sure that everybody can relate and understand. So somebody might be sitting in here that their native language isn't English. And if I threw in something that, was, I'll say an Americanism that you guys would all get, they might take offense to it, so it's just something to keep in mind as you go. Oh yes, I have a bunch of examples here. Just give me a second here. So when putting formal communication together, constantly ask yourself, what am I trying to say? What is my objective? What do I want everyone to remember? And finally, what is my true message? So what is the takeaway? So this sentence here is actually this was actually taken from a guy that some people know, I don't see him in the room, which is really annoying me. But there's words here that he really likes. So there's this, or there's this. And my next one, which I'm sure everybody can relate, when I'm doing training, I worked with a lot of product experts in the past that love to take like 20 words to explain one step. For example, this, which I put to this. Just very clear, precise, here's what you gotta do, here's how you do it. Maybe some formatting in there, but yeah, there's a huge difference. Like even, it's not so much big words, but even taking stuff like in order to, just say to. Drives me nuts. I hear people say it, I'm like, just say to. And fundamental, of course, everyone knows what that word is. I'm just throwing that out there because I've heard it already today and it drives me nuts.
She has a personal hatred for the word fundamental.
I hate it. But I worked for a company where we had a huge company meeting, and I swear, whatever the C-level was, every other sentence had fundamental in it, and I listened to it for an hour, so kind of stuck with it. What else? Oh yes, for what? This is just from that same course where I had the who will do 10. This is just a sample of what the person will learn in the course. So you can see they're very precise. They're going to install a product, they're going to perform operational verification, consolidate systems. So this is very, very precise. They're measurable verbs, and what I mean by that is you can test them. So when this training is done, the idea is that they can sit and they can install a product, and they should be tested on that. This is just very high level. Oh yes, when defining training, actually something to think about if you ever do training, try to avoid the words understand, learn, and know, because you can't measure them. You cannot test somebody's ability to understand. You can teach them how to perform a function, but you can't teach them to understand how to perform it. Does that make sense? People will think of stuff like this, but when you're evaluating, and even when you're doing like certification exams, it's something to keep in mind. You've got to make sure everything maps back, so everything has to be clear and precise, and you have to be able to, like, everybody's taken like written CISP. Anybody in this room I'm sure has. All those objectives, everything you've done has to be measured back, and the board behind it has to be able to document everything that you've done, everything you've written. It has to map exactly. So they have to have precise objectives written out. In addition, training is more my specialty, so I tend to go that way. But this really does hit across writing and presenting in general. So what it talks to, this is the end one, by the way. When considering the what aspect of training documenting or presenting, you need to know what people know. You need to know what other people need to know to use your product or service. So for example, in training, what they need to know becomes your prerequisites. And then this comes into, so these are from that course. I just picked a course from a previous client. These were their modules, and here were the flushed out objectives or lesson titles and the objectives. So everything maps back. And everything, again, is written around this. So a prerequisite here is knowing distributed environments. It's all pulled through the labs, and everything's tested at the end. You know what this is saying? How's everyone doing, by the way?
Hidden message.
There you go.
Wow.
See, I could only get so creative. And here's just some more words, just kind of break it up a little. And I know I'm going to say this wrong because I picked some funky words that I don't normally say, but has my specificity ameliorated your thinking around how you communicate? Can you prognosticate my next move? It sounds really funny to me. This was actually taken from another company website. I don't know if they're here. No, I don't think they're represented here in the company. But actually, I think. No, I know. I think Andrew found this, and he found it because he said, "Well, this is great. What are they measuring against? 25% greater than what?"
Wendy, does that sound familiar?
Yes.
I think we've seen slides like these.
Yeah, I love picking apart marketing, which I shouldn't. One of my best friends is VP of marketing somewhere. But yes, I love doing this in marketing because I just don't get it. Like, they don't know me, they don't know where I work. Well, they don't know where I work. But yeah, I just don't know what they're measuring against, I guess, it stands out to me here. So when this was a really tough one when it came to clear communication. But when it comes up to me is syncing what you're saying with a product or service, especially training and documenting. How many people here actually work for a company that will not release a product if their docs and training are not ready? Anybody? I've actually worked, I worked for a company that wouldn't, they stopped their GA date because training wasn't done. They actually have put that in place. It's very, very rare, but it's effective. It's amazing how quickly the product experts are willing to help create training content, help the tech writers when you tell them they can't release. And it's not only is it really effective to keep everything in sync, it makes everything a lot more accurate. Is there anybody here that's a developer that actually does help a writing group or is the writing group? Well, that's awesome because then you should be well versed. In one of my roles, it seems many moons ago, I did support, I did training, I did writing, I did troubleshooting, and it was the best job I ever did. It was 13 years ago? Yeah, 13, 14 years ago, and I can still tell you what the product did. And I can probably still troubleshoot it, not that it exists anymore. But I remember it like it was yesterday because I was so involved in it. Whenever they had a release coming out, I did the test cases and ran them. And then I also did support. And I don't think a lot of people realize what the true benefit of pulling in a writing team. I honestly, if I was running if I was my boss, I would be taking test cases and giving them to the training team and the writing team and say, here you go. And then report back because then they'll not only will they find bugs, they'll actually come up with questions, I'm sure, that will help them in the long run and help them put in the product better. Yeah, it's amazing. And as I said, a lot of people don't think about it, but it's truly beneficial. And I think it's a smart move by any company to incorporate training and writing teams. And also back and forth.
How many people would you say need to be in the content or the document group based on the overall size of the company?
Depends on the product. Yeah, to me it really depends on the product and the state of the company. Like a startup, I mean, I was at a startup recently and I was the writer and it took me 3 months to get everything high level done and they're still fleshing out the nitty gritty. But long run, I guess it depends on the service offerings too. Like at FireEye right now, I know they have 2 writers in one group. That's one product. So, and I think it works. I don't know because I don't know them. I really say it's case by case. I would think one would be tight. Like when I was at Stormpath, which is where I was before here, before FireEye, I was alone, but it was still a small company and they're still developing. So I was able to script what they had done in like 2 months, and then it was just keeping up with them. And ideally, like any company that's been around for a while and has documentation in place, I would think they get to the point where they start cutting tech writers, really. I think some companies get to the point where, depending on how they're delivering their tech writing, they'll actually turn to a product expert to update it, especially when they're using like HTML and stuff, and that's it. Like anybody can go update that once it's in place, in theory. I mean, you might still want somebody to like do a copy edit on it, make sure it still reads okay, but yeah, it really depends. I would think at least 2, and then pull them around. Like my ideal job is everything. I like to touch everything, but I like to break things too. So that's one thing I'm really good at, apparently. I don't know what else to say about this. I don't think I have anything else. Well, from training. When it comes to conferences. Exactly, right? Everybody laughs, but it's true because, you know, there's a CFP on right now for August 6th is the date. The conference is until February. So when do you sit down, write up your thoughts? What are you going to say? Like, I don't know what's going to be worth talking about in 6 months. I mean, I can rehash this stuff and update it, find some more marketing examples, but there's a lot of technical content out there that, you know, you're thinking 7 months in advance. I don't know. To be honest, I think it's kind of a turn-off that they're asking for stuff so early. I don't know if I'd want to go to the talks. I want new stuff. I'd actually like to challenge a conference to organize CFP and everything in 3 months. Because then it's current, they're fairly current. Like I look at it like what's being called for now for August 6th being presented in February. So if anything happens between now and February, but your talk submission doesn't match something that comes out, well then you're going to present at the next talk. So it's going to be old by then. Or you're going to find another conference in the middle and it's going to be still kind of new, but not over. I don't know. I think conferences take too long to organize. BSides is pretty good, but the big ones I find they ask too early.
You're talking about RSA.
I'm not saying anything. I'm not, you know who I'm talking about. Everybody knows who I'm talking about. I don't even have to elaborate, but yeah. Oh yes. So I'd like you just to read this. I got this. I did find from an RSA submission. I will say that much. So, thank you. There we go. So the first sentence says, email phishing attacks are on the rise, hitting hundreds of major brands across nearly every sector of the economy. Yep. Combating these threats requires a coordinated effort from both security and marketing teams working together. And the last sentence, security teams bring expertise about cybercrime and threat vectors while marketing often holds the keys to email systems that require new authentication protocols. So can anybody tell me guess what this is actually from? Where I might have pulled this from?
The company is out of business.
It's actually a description of a panel, an RSA panel. I'm serious. Like I went looking for examples, and I'm like, what? What is this panel about? I honestly thought it read to me more like an email about phishing, how they're going to attack phishing, but it didn't read as a panel to me. I guess when I think of panels or even talks, you're going to say, in this panel we will, or this panel will discuss. But there's nothing. This was the blurb, and it's just kind of looked odd to me. An accepted one, yes. And it was the only one. I read a lot that had like those buzzwords that some other companies like to use. But you know what? It made sense. This just didn't make sense to me as a panel. Like it didn't draw me in. It didn't say what they'd really be talking about. It's just more stating facts to me. I don't know. Am I alone? I don't know who was in it, but yeah, it seems kind of odd to me. Content where. So when it comes to developing training, you need to figure out where you're going to place it, right? Are you going to go online, or are you going to travel and send out instructors, which can be very costly, of course. When you're reaching a global audience, so with limited resources, perhaps online is the best. Perhaps you want to go customized training, and sending somebody on site is the way to go. Regardless of how it's delivered, though, you really have to keep in mind a global audience. Even right now at FireEye, we have 3 trainers that are just on the go, and we have one that we're hiring in the Philippines, and we don't know if she can trained in some of the places because she's a woman. So it's a challenge for her to deal with. We know she's an expert, we know she can do it, but we just don't know how well she's going to be received. So just something to keep in mind. It's a shame, but it's part of what you deal with. And of course, Jack. So when you're presenting, where do you present? I chose B-Sides. I like B-Sides. I like the community. I like everything it does. I'm also not true tech, so I don't fit in really at the other conferences. At least they don't think I do, which is fine. But yeah, it's where do you present, but also how often do you present? A lot of people will take a talk and pitch it to 4 talks in a year. At what point does it get old? At what point does the audience not even make sense anymore? I think people need to take a step back, and instead of trying to get into every conference, get a little more creative with their talks and truly mix it up. It gets a little old. I haven't been to many conferences, but I've seen the same talks delivered 2 or 3 times. And I count on one hand the number of conferences I've been to, so that says a lot. When it comes to why. So up at the top, I actually rehashed what I put at the beginning of my talk, which was you will see how to get your message across effectively, engage others by. So I have my what and my why covered, and then how. Creating clear and focused training content, using online communications, which we'll get to, and providing effective error messages, which we'll get to. At the bottom, this is just back from that course that I pulled from a previous client, so the idea is this is the what's in it for me. So when you're developing training, you really want to pull people in, you want to give them reasons, right? Why do I care about performing an operational verification? So to help ensure that problems don't arise from improper application configuration, for example. There's many ways you can go with it. The important thing when it comes to any content, though, is really to give a person a reason. You got to motivate them. Training, presenting, even documenting, you can get to a point where you just ramble and ramble and ramble and people lose interest. I do. And I'm a writer. So here's another company write-up, which I thought was kind of funny. Again, I pick on things because I just see the fluff words, or I see the ramble, and I sort of lose interest a little bit. So this one, I guess what stood out to me here was this, it sounds like they have a great product and service, but I think they can really shorten what they're saying. Because, when you think about what goes on a company website too, I think a lot of people forget about that. You go on a company website, and depending on your monitor resolution, if this is on my iPad, that's half my resolution, this blur. I mean, it's just something to keep in mind when you get into too many words and you kind of ramble. Qu'est-ce que c'est ça? That's French for those who don't know. Canadian. So, I still learn French when I can. And if you didn't notice, Canadian flag. Just subtle things. When it comes to how, when delivering content, with training, you can do standard instructor-led training. You can go do an online offering, of course. When it comes to training or presenting, you can also throw in pretty graphs and lots of colors, make it beautiful. Or maybe, none of these people are here. Well, Wendy's here. Wendy's got a cameo. But it's also how, what makes sense to deliver your message? Is it worth standing up solo like I'm doing? Is it worth pulling up some buddies and doing a panel? I know people bash panels a lot, but sometimes it's good. It's just, a way to just to talk about things and, expose a topic. Of course, if you stay on topic, that's a full other ball of wax. Because I've sat in a couple of panels where they definitely steer different directions. But, sometimes it makes sense to do that too, like the burnout panel. I know people like to talk about burnout and anxiety. I don't think somebody wants to take that on by themselves, really. So here, I actually have a little sample training content that I did for my previous job, just to show what exactly precise training is, very clear. This was just registering for storm path account. Don't know how well it's big. It's just kind of small on here. So everything's very specific. Complete the fields, pressing the tab to move between the fields. That's it. Very clear.
What, if any, differences need to be between internal training and external training towards customers?
That, depends on the company. I work for a company where the view is a course is a course is a course. So your training content's just written to a general audience, and you rely on your instructor to run with it depending on the true audience. What I'm trying to do, this is my big project at FireEye, is I'm trying to come up with use cases for every vector so that when instructors go out, they have labs, they have demos, and they have just stuff to run with specific to their training. But yeah, it really depends on the company and the budget. Like I'm a full-time employee at FireEye. My previous job, I was a full-time employee for that company, but I was outsourced into companies. So they would come to us with budgets. So one of the biggest clients, they were the view, of course, and it was very precise. What you're seeing similar to here is what I did. I mean, that's great. I did it for 6 years because it had to be. It had to be specific. Their budget was only so much, and we'd come up with stuff to help the instructors. Either typically just notes, like and examples. Labs. I found labs are the best way to pull in the different sectors, giving examples, trying to come up with a scenario. I know a guy's going into a bank. He's been hired to do something, so give him a scenario. You've got it. If you're doing like an identity type product, here's your sample use case. You've got these guys, they need this access, blah, 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 but you also wrap it into a context of a bank, let's say. Yeah, that's how I find the labs come in better, because you can really tailor those. But like to something to keep in mind too, when you're delivering training, especially instructor-led, if you go to print and give a hard copy, you can pay $400 one book for colored print. So budget plays a huge factor, and also how you want to deliver it too. A lot of people are trying to go to PDFs, but then you go to PDFs and want to try to put these on printing and sharing. Yeah, lots of considerations when it comes to training. Money. So anyways, that was just a little blurb. Just a little break, something different. I love doing learning. Online communication. This I find the funniest because, and how many people are on Twitter? I love, some people are like, no, not me. Well, one thing that stands out to me with Twitter is there's people that like to ramble on Twitter, and there's 140 character limit. There's one guy in particular who, again, is not in this room, but he'll take 3 to 5 tweets to share his thoughts. Well, I only follow 200 people, and I say only because I know that's not many, but his tweets are never sequential in my timeline, ever. So if I see one, I might see the second, and then I just skim the next 3. Because honestly, I don't look. I truly don't look. So maybe, when you're thinking of communicating online, you really got to be precise, especially with Twitter. I mean, you can always do a blog. I have one, which I haven't updated since I started working at FireEye, but you really need to think about what you want to say and who you're trying to attract and what you're looking for. If you're really looking to engage, I'd say a blog with comments. The comments are kind of tricky, but at least it's a little more open, and I guess it's easier or better, more effective, I think, than Twitter. And I'm on Twitter. I don't tweet a whole lot. See, I worry about what I say. I'm not kind of Twitter either. So I'll type and then I delete, and then I'll type again and I'm like, I'll delete. Because I do worry about what I say and how it comes across and perception of me. I know a lot of people don't care, and that's cool.
Like your husband?
Like my husband, he has a bit of a filter. He'll IM me. Instead of tweeting it, he'll IM me, which is protected. So, there's always ways around. Just trying to think what else to say. I mean, everybody knows what's out there online, but again, this is all I have for online, because I look at online like everything else. You really have to think about your who, your what, your when, your where, your why, and your how. What truly makes sense for what you're looking to share. So it's very brief. And there's error messages. These are just some I found online. I wanted to actually pick apart some website errors, but I couldn't find some good ones without upsetting somebody. So the top one says, proceeding with the operation delete will erase the contents of your hard drive. Do you wish to proceed or delete? Which I thought was good. And of course, one that I didn't put up here, which everybody knows, is keyboard not found, press F2 to continue or F4 to continue. I didn't put it up there, but that's always a good one. The bottom one says, cannot delete 620. There is not enough disk space. Delete one or more files to free disk space, and then try again to free space on this drive by deleting older unnecessary files. Click disk cleanup or OK. So it's basically, they're both loops, right? They're doing the same thing. And then just a couple more. There's an error opening this message, an error has occurred. Fantastic. And the last one of the day, did you know the test file is missing? Or you're missing a test file. Yay. Any comments?
It's hard to catch every error.
I know. I love finding this stuff. People hate me sometimes. I haven't done a lot of testing yet, but I love it. I love testing. Especially when that job I was talking about like 14 years ago. I love nothing more than testing, because then it helped me troubleshoot too. And I was on the phone 3 days a week, 2 to 3 days a week, depending on how the shift went. And those days when I wasn't on the phone, I was testing, I was documenting, training. I ended up being train the trainer. But it's amazing how much you learn by thinking like everything, breaking things. When I was at Stormpath, they're like, just log in and find out what you need to document. I'm like, okay. And then I'm like, and I click something, and then I send an I'm like, this did this. He's like, you found it, thank you. I'm like, great, no problem. What else can I find for you? It's fine. I mean, how else do you learn? And I don't think a lot of people realize that writers and trainers really benefit from hands-on. Throw them into a lab, throw them into anything, and just let them get their hands dirty. So, getting to the end here. So remember who, what, when, where, why, and how. Basic English, clean and simple. So remember who you were writing for or speaking for, what your message or goal is, when your message is worth sharing. Also keep that in mind. Where, why. The biggest thing I find lacking is why. A lot of people forget that they need to motivate people. Like, people will put in a talk submission with what they want to say, but they don't include that motivation. I read many talk descriptions. I'll be like, okay, so that's what you have to say, but why do I care? People just don't think about that. And actually, growing up, I forgot to mention this earlier, I grew up in a family where if they got really sick and tired of listening to you ramble, they were notorious for saying, spit it out already. Like, get to your point. So this is what I've grown up with, so writing, technical writing is good for me. Where you can find me, I'm on Twitter, Keli. Hey, as I said, I don't say a whole lot, but I like to interact with people, and I like to bug people, especially when they ramble on Twitter over 140 characters. Blog, haven't been there in a while, but it's outside looking InfoSec. And what I talk about there is, well, stuff like this, because I'm not considered tech or InfoSec. Normally, I don't fall under it. I have worked in InfoSec space for a few years now, so I write about stuff from my perspective, being that non-typical tech person. And LinkedIn, you can find me there as well. And I'm at FireEye. That's what I do. That's where I am. Any comments, questions? Am I full of crap? Call me out. Sure. Or Wendy, it doesn't matter.
How do you address the use of jargon, especially when speaking in non-technical terms?
I cut it out.
Don't use it at all.
I don't at all. How do you address the use of jargon? I just cut it out. I've taken sales presentations and taken them from like 20 slides to 10 because it's rambling and it's jargon. It's stuff that you really shouldn't be saying, or it doesn't convey well. Yeah, I don't know how else to say it other than that. It's just cleaning the crap. Yeah, Wendy.
Somewhat related, when is it okay to use leet speak in documentation?
Should use leads.
Are you looking for an out
Know
for
your
your
audience.
desk?
Yeah, well, when Andrew was an analyst, I used to read his reports. And I'll just leave it at
She was
that.
the one.
Yeah, it's funny because actually when we did the book together, I think it was an eye opener for Andrew to be like very specific, very clean. A lot of it, I said, people forget, well, motivation is huge, especially when you're doing a little workbook talk. Oh, I can't emphasize that enough. When it comes to training, you gotta motivate people or they're not gonna show up. And when it comes to writing and communicating in general, clean, simple, basic English, you gotta figure, especially if you're traveling and you're doing conferences, you're gonna have an international audience. They've gotta understand what you're saying. Don't be throwing in those crap words. Like seriously, bifurcate, I'm like, really? That drives me nuts. But simple, we keep it really simple. I don't know how to say it. Simple, sweet, effective. It took, this is like 27 slides. I could not do more. Yes, orange shirt.
When you're working with somebody to like condense their content,
Yes.
how do you address with them that they overdone?
Depends on my working relationship. He's asking how to address, basically work with somebody that tends to like ramble, for lack of a better way to put it, how I overcomplicate things. Yeah, it really depends on the person. I've had like managers come to me and say, just clean it, do what you have to do. I've had people that, well, this is what I want to say. I'm like, well, this is what you're gonna say, because there's standards. Like a lot of companies will have standards. Like the company that I pulled from all those examples, they have, when I started working with them, they had a standards guide of 140 pages that we had to follow. So it really helped guide the structure. Like they even had a word list that we couldn't use. Like you never use the word ensure, for example, because you cannot, no, you don't even use should.
In technical documentation, never use the word should.
Never use should, never use ensure. You can use helps ensure. Because you cannot ensure, you cannot guarantee anything. You don't use should, you use can. You don't say need to, you say must for emphasis. Like there's a slew of stuff I can tell you to avoid, and it's just ingrained. Yeah, so it depends on the person. Like I had one guy where I just pick up the phone and be like, look, really? He'd be like, yeah, I know, but I'm like, so it's working together more than anything. Nicole,
Implement the grandmother rule where possible.
implement the grandmother rule.
Yes, if you think your grandmother would say, what are you saying, then redefine it.
Yeah,
And I've
that's
been
true,
able
if
to
your
find-
grandmother doesn't get it.
Or
Well,
grandfather.
I'm also the type of person, I'll read things like 3 times, if I still don't get it, then I reach back to the person. If I can't rephrase it after 2 or 3 reads, then I contact them for clarification.
Now, of course, my grandmother uses an iPad.
Well, there you go. At the back.
I've got one slightly better than the grandmother rule. Implement the second language rule. Assume your audience does not speak English.
Well, yeah, that's what, yeah, exactly.
You mentioned it earlier. I work in a place where people are usually functionally trilingual. English is the third language.
There you go.
So, expect they don't understand what you're talking about, and they don't understand what you're talking about in English jargon. So it's not all,
Yeah.
be concise.
I've heard of a situation through somebody in this room, and I don't know the situation because it wasn't there, but they had a colloquialism in their delivery, and they went to another country, and it was wrong in that country to say what they said. So,
Spanish composition.
is that what it was?
Yeah, so when I had a talk here in the US and they made a joke about the Spanish position, and they went and gave the talk in Spain.
But yeah, see what I mean? So it's, it's all well and good to have fun in talks, but you really got to be careful. Yeah.
Like the other guy that went to Asia and called his audience too polite in the first 2 minutes. Says, I'm not sure how I'm going to talk to you, you guys are too polite.
Really? Interesting.
They really didn't expect the Spanish Inquisition.
Nobody expects to see that.
Anyone else? Any comments? Questions? Yes?
Yeah, I'm listening to the difficulty of the grandmother rule, the foreign language rule, particularly for those of us that are, I'm an engineer, so
love you.
Well, some people call it geeky and ambiguous, What do you mean by that?
Yeah.
It takes me a lot of words sometimes to be precise.
Sure, and sometimes it can't be avoided. It's to avoid, it's to be as simple as possible where possible, really. And you even get into tech terms that don't translate, you can't avoid them, so.
I found this great quote from an 18th century Scottish guy. It said, "There's no greater impediment to the advancement of knowledge than the ambiguity of words," which, as an engineer, I love, because that means to be precise.
There's over the years, there's a huge difference between sales guys and engineers. But then you get the engineers pitching sales, or, they occasionally, they've done both, and you're like, what are you? Because right.
Engineer, you can't say you're engineers. It's a brand.
No, you can't. No. But that's when somebody like me who can at least come up with the presentation that's clean and help. Speak of it as you want. I mean, as a presenter, you need to be aware of things. But I think the biggest thing for any company is just to find somebody like me that can take the engineering speak and put it to basic English, and then let sales run with it. By all means, they can spin it their own way, so long as they keep certain things in mind, right? yeah, exactly. Hear no evil, see no evil. Yes, orange shirt again.
My name's Chad, by the way.
Chad.
Is there any additional reading that you would recommend, maybe something that's talked to you along the way, or you've seen help other people to refine what you're saying, not only just written, but also just conversation? I'm a sales engineer, so
Yeah.
guilty as charged.
Okay, this is. I'm going to wrap it up now because I have to cut it. Honestly, it's tough. It's something that's just been ingrained with me. And a lot of the stuff that I write around is provided by the clients I've written for in the past. But outside of client provided stuff, the Microsoft manual of style, especially when it comes to labs, it's amazing. Just simple things like instead of doing drag and drop, if you say drag drop is implied, for example, so that when you're explaining steps, stuff like that, Microsoft manual of style is very good when it comes to doing the construction steps and guiding how you phrase things like frames and panes and stuff like that. Yeah, I think that's it. Got to wrap. Give it up to the next person, Mr. Corbin.